Hey, Buru, hey, Boya, hey, Buchich, everybody in Cyberland. All right, I know I'm about 1 minute early. So, I figure I just log on, make sure everything is working okay, making sure everybody can hear me just fine. Looks like I got a good connection. Boom, let me adjust the mic. Make sure that we're doing okay over here on this end. Hey, well, first off, hey, Buru Boy, Buchich. I want to say a couple of shout outs here in the chat. I got Steve, Iburo Boya. I got M-Lock, Iburo Boya. All right. I got Dez, Iburo Boya. I got Janae, Iburo Boya. Oh, yeah. M-Lock is Gustavo. that threw me off a little bit myself. I don't know. Hey, Iburo Boya Bucheche. Hey, I'm glad to see everybody's on here. We got quite a few people right now streaming through. Iburo Boya Bucheche, Alyssa. Yeah, the glasses. As we get older, I got to make sure my reading glasses, my computer glasses are well, to make sure that, we got to take care of ourselves, right? But hey, so we're going to talk on a very special topic today. It's an Odu that we pretty much find ourselves, crossing our paths of this Odu from time to time. And this Odu, is called Osa Ogbe. A lot of times you hear people call it Osa Eshu. Sometimes you hear people say OSALOFOGBEYÓ, right? And the main reason why you see these different names is because there's different Patakis that associate themselves with this. And that particularly, we find ourselves kind of at a crossroad of what is the lesson that needs to be learned. Well, one in Osaeshu, we begin to see the relationship between the Odun of OSALOFOGBEYÓ and Eshu, right? When we talk about who Eshu is, you're going to begin to see the true connection between Eshu, Elegua, and OSALOFOGBEYÓ or Osa and you're going to begin to see the greatness that is that particular sign with the relationship that has to do with Eshu and Elegua. In addition, when you see the sign of OSALOFOGBEYÓ, we talk a lot about pirite pirite, the spirituality, right? That has a lot to do with OSALOFOGBEYÓ. And you're going to begin to kind of see as we begin to deep dive into OSALOFOGBEYÓ, right? Or Saobe, I'm going to say calling it Osaobe going forward. You're going to begin to start to see the importance of this sign, because this sign again is not only just important for those who hold this sign in Ikofa, Awofaka, or even Babalaos, Awoni Orumilas that have this Odun, right, as a Toyale in one of the three itas. You're going to begin to see the strong connection that this sign has with spirituality, but more importantly, with what community needs to focus on going forward. All right. So with that said, before I dive in, as always, the like, the subscribe, the share, keep pushing the good word out. Look at the descriptions below if you need to email or you need to kind of set something up if you need further information. And then we're going to jump right in. Hey, so in order for me to truly dissect OSALOFOGBEYÓ, I always like to start with a story. And I always tell people, stories, have not died down on what was its intentions, right? People used to tell stories in campfires. People would tell stories in order to pass down oral traditions. People would tell stories to pass down the moral and ethical values that is, the word of Ifa, the word of God. And how do we get that good word out? And you begin to see that, although I mentioned God, some people may feel like, hey, this is a strong connection to spirituality, and I don't want to focus on spirituality. But Ifa, believe it or not, teaches us how to be good people, better for the community, uplifting, right? And those things matter. So the Pataki I want to share with you, Saobe, talks a lot about the consequences of hypocrisy and the power of Eshu, right? Kind of feeding into our narrative a little bit. So let's begin. The title of this story is called The Fly and the Tiger, right? This is a lesson, right, of truth and balance. So long ago in the bustling town right, near a great ocean, there lived a powerful but a very arrogant chief named Adiremi. Adiremi, he was very known for his wealth and sharp tongue, but also for his hypocrisy. While preaching virtues of honesty and humility to his people, he secretly engaged in deceitful schemes, right? And amassed more riches, more and more every day. His actions angered the Orishas, for he violated the spiritual laws that govern the balance of the universe. I take a pause there. How many of you can reflect on this and begin to truly, see this part of action in your everyday life? Whether it's with somebody you work with, someone in government, someone in your community, someone in your, probably in your inner circle, your friends, your family, etc. Right? You begin to kind of see this. So one day, a mysterious traveler arrived in the town, right? Dressed humbly in white, carrying a staff that was adorned with quarries, right? This was Eshu, disguised as a wanderer. Eshu had been sent by Orumila to test Aderemi character and to remind the town of the importance of truth and spiritual discipline. So the traveler approached, right, Aderemi and said, "Great chief, I have come to you, right, to offer you an opportunity to expand your wealth. But first, you must answer a riddle. Fail, and you must promise to make a sacrifice to the Orishas and cleanse yourself of the sea." All right, so Aderemi was very intrigued, right? Obviously, he likes his money. Obviously, he wants to see where this goes. So, intrigued and driven by greed, right? What do you think he did? Aderemi agreed. So Eshu smiled and asked, "What is small enough to sit on the tiger, but powerful enough to disturb its peace?" Aderemi laughed, thinking the answer was beneath him, right? He said, "Surely it is nothing. No creature could disturb the mighty tiger." So Eshu nodded solemnly, right? And he said, "Then come with me." He led Aderemi into the forest, where they encountered a tiger that was resting in the shade. As they got closer and they inspected the tiger, Aderemi saw a tiny fly buzzing around the tiger's ear, disturbing its peace. The tiger swatted at the fly, growling in frustration. So Eshu turned to Aderemi and he said, "You see, even the smallest disturbance can unsettle the mightiest. The fly is hypocrisy. The tiger is your spirit, your soul. Your deceit unsettles your spirit and your community." Aderemi was stunned into silence, but his arrogance, right, as we probably all seen many times before with many different people, refused to let him admit fault. So he dismissed Eshu's words and returned to his town. That night, strange things began to happen. His crops failed, his wealth dwindled, and the people began to mistrust him. Aderemi realized too late that the hypocrisy had set his community and his destiny out of balance. So very desperate, like many people become, right? When they find out they should have listened to some advice that, they should have heeded early on. Aderemi consulted a Babalao who divined the sign Osa Ogbe. The Babalao revealed Eshu's test and warned that unless Aderemi made immediate sacrifices to Eshu and the Orishas, his downfall will continue. Aderemi humbled himself, and he performed the prescribed ebo, a rooster to Eshu, the white cloth to Obadala, honey to Ochung, etc., 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 right? He made all the appropriate, sacrifices to the appropriate orishas, right? And he also began to mend, publicly with his community, confessing his deceit and dedicating his life to serving his community truthfully. From that day forward, Aderemi became a model citizen, a model person of the community, right? With humility and truth. The Orishas forgave him. The Orishas, better yet, opened up to him again, right? And his fortune returned. But though not in material wealth alone, it was with the people's trust, right? And the harmony of his town that were his greatest rewards. So when we pay attention to this particular Pataki, a couple of things we want to kind of truly reflect on, right? So what is the moral of this Pataki? And let's make this interactive. I want to see what the chat has to say. So as you guys type in, what do you think is the moral of this Pataki? And maybe you don't want to, participate, which is fine, right? I'll say a couple of shout outs out there. All right, I say hi to Alicia, Marcela, Iburuboya, the Anderson sisters, Iburuboya, David Iburuboya, Queen, Taishan, Ashley, Iburuboya. Hey, good to see you guys all on there. Okay, as you guys begin to type in, maybe some of your thoughts, maybe some of your experiences, maybe you have questions, right? Let's talk about the moral of this Pataki. The moral of this Pataki is, hypocrisy unsettles everything. Your own spirit, right? Very much like the fly to the tiger, right? And we gotta almost resonate, right, on what Eshu truly told, Aderemi, which was, the fly is hypocrisy, the tiger is the spirit, the soul, right? And the deceit unsettles the spirit and the community, right? So even small acts of deceit, right, can cause a great turmoil. A lot of times we hear people say the analogy of one seed can bloom, but it can bloom a flower or it can bloom a weed. One seed, right, or one spore can start cancer, right? We have to take care of ensuring that we keep our spirits healthy and we remove ourselves from hypocrisy, right? That's one of the first rules and one of the first moral laws to OSALOFOGBEYÓ, Osa Ogbe. So for those that align with this sign, right, that is a very true statement that you have to always live by. In addition, this is also a lesson for the community as a whole, not just for those with this Odu. Small things can eventually affect the large things. Janae, you said it. Well said. Humility, humbling oneself. Iburuboya, Steve, well done. You need to stay humble. Don't be a hypocrite. Absolutely. Now let's look at the other side of this a little bit, right? Separate yourself from people who reveal themselves to be hypocrites. Protect your spirit. Absolutely. 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 Hey, Buruboya, Abuche Chechase. So let's look at the other piece of this. Eshu, right? Eshu is going to always test us to reveal the truth of our character, right? More so in the Odu Osa Ogbe, but more importantly, to the community at large. Only through the humility, like mentioned in the chat, right? And adherence, right, to the spiritual laws of things, your ida. You know what I mean? What does it mean to be ethical, moral, and legal in your community, right? Can balance be restored to you and anybody else, right? So that's very important to remember. Then we begin to talk about, right, the power of Ebo. A lot of times, and I've seen recently where the power of Ebo has been kind of understated, right, or underestimated, better yet. And a lot of folks don't understand that Ebo comes in not just, hey, I gave an animal to an Orisha, or I gave an Adimu to an Orisha, but they forget that the power of the Ebo What is it? Both sacrifice is what matters. This is why it's important that we remember that sacrifices come in many shapes and forms. Have you personally understood what the sacrifice was for? Did you personally understand how you need to re-vector character, right, in order for you to grow and to be more prosperous? The orishas and the sacrifices that we give is a sign of your faith, your spirit, and your aspirations to truly make a difference and push yourself forward, right? So in this particular Pataki, right, lies not only in material offerings, but also in sincere, right, repent to a certain point, right, and those actions align with your spiritual values, begin to give you an alignment with your ori that is unmatched, and that's important to always remember. Does he call us out? But boy, of course I called you guys out. So Eshu absolutely will call you out. You know what I mean? He will. Right? Eshu, one of the first things, and I don't want to deter from this topic, but one of the first things that Eshu does, not just for OSALOFOGBEYÓ, Osa Ogbe, is that Eshu, upon receiving him, begins to try to push you into the right road. This is why we call Eshu the road opener, or Elegua the road opener. Eshu, a different concept, but not Elegua and Eshu are not necessarily the same, but they share many characteristics. So Eshu knows the roads, understands where we're going, understands how people need to maneuver. So when we say those things, we say that Eshu will push you to the road that you need to go to, whether it's the long road, the short road, or the right road, right? Because sometimes there's ways to get around them all, right? But sometimes we have to get some hard lessons must be learned in order for us to ensure that we grow our spirit, our soul, and we align ourselves with our Ori. So very, very beautiful. Good comment, Elisa. A Buddha boy, a best version of myself, a Buddha boy. All right, now let's talk about the other piece of this, right? Let's talk about the leadership. OSALOFOGBEYÓ, Osa Ogbe is a sign of leadership. This is probably one of many signs, right, that truly talks about the aspects of leadership. And this Pataki kind of, makes it well-rounded to understand that even leaders must be tested. OSALOFOGBEYÓ finds themselves in predicaments, right, where they can either be the leader or the follower. OSALOFOGBEYÓ must be able to recognize their role at that moment in order to ensure their success going forward. OSALOFOGBEYÓ, right? And at least in this particular Pataki, we begin to kind of see that leadership requires what? Right? Honesty and humility. As the well-being of the community reflects, right, on the integrity of its leader, OSALOFOGBEYÓ must resonate with that. OSALOFOGBEYÓ doesn't necessarily have too much wiggle room to be deceitful. They have to ensure that they're aligning themselves properly in order to truly benefit from everything that Olodumare is putting in front of them, what God is putting in front of them, right? And who better to moderate that than Eshu? And this is why it's super important to understand that. Long road, short road, or the right road. Hey, you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised. All right, so now let's talk about OSALOFOGBEYÓ. I truly want to dive into OSALOFOGBEYÓ a little bit, and I want to make sure that we're all tracking the same thing that I track. Right? When we talk about OSALOFOGBEYÓ, right, we talk a lot about. I'm gonna share this piece. At OSALOFOGBEYÓ, we find that it's a very troubling sign because it challenges the person. Anybody aligned with this Odun will understand what I'm saying. OSALOFOGBEYÓ has the ability, or better yet, finds itself in a position where they can get those quick wins, right? Make that quick money. They can the sign or the Odun finds itself in a constant state of hypocrisy, desires, temptations, right? Because it's a sign of so much opportunity, a sign of good greatness. And with every greatness, right? You find yourself in these circles, right, of influences, whether good or bad, right? So let's dig into a little bit of the aspects of OSALOFOGBEYÓ, right? When we see OSALOFOGBEYÓ, I think the first thing I see is the theme of I would say duality and transformation. OSALOFOGBEYÓ reveals in many of the Patakis and many of the scribes of OSALOFOGBEYÓ reveal the dynamic tension, right, between spiritual clarity, right, and material temptation. Right? A lot of times, OSALOFOGBEYÓ warns us against succumbing, right, to those illusions and those highlights, right? The need for ensuring that we are seeing the world for what it is, and we are ensuring we understand our capacity and we understand, where we are taking ourselves, where are we taking our community, where do we fit in is very important with OSALOFOGBEYÓ. Osa is a sign where ethical practices and integrity are key, right? Because the interplay, it's all about the interplay of the challenges, the blessings, right? It demands spiritual discipline, right? And they have to adhere to those divine guidance. This is why this sign is so important. This sign is very strong. This sign is used in many different concepts in within the Yoruba traditions, because the power that it holds when it's aligned properly, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing, right? And it allows us to push the community forward. So then we start to touch on some other aspects, right? And let me make sure that I'm not missing anything in the chat, right? Eshu's watching it, Buddha boy. Yep. To be honest with anyone in this world, honest with oneself first. Absolutely. Well said, Joel. So when we start to kind of see the temptation and the misguided actions, when we start talking about OSALOFOGBEYÓ, we understand that this Odun speaks on the temptations, right? Specifically the temptations of hypocrisy, right? Those desires, right? The temptation to be dishonest for the sake of personal gain, right? So we have to truly reflect on that a little bit, right? Because, you know, the price of things is necessarily the sacrifice of one's spirit and alignment in order to gather material value. And we have to be careful with that. How much are we willing to sacrifice of ourselves in order to push ourselves forward? Right? And many people may say, hey, this is what I want, this is where I want to go, and this is what I like, and I'm willing to sacrifice. But OSALOFOGBEYÓ has to be very careful, right? A lot of if you control your spirituality and your alignment, then you are very much ahead of the game, because it's the material setbacks, right, that are going to hurt you. Because OSALOFOGBEYÓ sees the world as, where am I standing today? What's my position today? And how do I move forward today? Instead of looking at the long game of, where do I need to go next? And how do I need to get there? More importantly, when we talk about how Eshu, makes his way into the sign, Eshu is a strong advocate for those who are aligned with this sign. Eshu is a strong advocate of those who can avoid the hypocrisy, the temptations, and the desires, right? And begins to place opportunities in front of them. But OSALOFOGBEYÓ, again, must jump at those opportunities, because Eshu is the one that's opening up those doors for you. Don't ever let an opportunity run by. So then, OSALOFOGBEYÓ comes with a lot of different recommendations, right? Because OSALOFOGBEYÓ has some strict warnings, right? Intended to protect, from calamity or spiritual imbalances or impurities. So those who align with those signs, or those who maybe receive this sign in a consultation, or maybe those, again, anybody who has this Odu, and those in the community, right? But this particular section, this particular, I guess these next few things are going to be more for the folks that are aligned with OSALOFOGBEYÓ. Because there's a reason why we always tell people, hey, be careful in OSALOFOGBEYÓ about eating eggs, pumpkin, beans, chocolate, right? And the reason why, these ewos, what we call these things that are prohibited from those that align with OSALOFOGBEYÓ is because they're toxic, right? It's like eating toxic and inflammatory tools that don't necessarily align with the Odu that cause an adon, a health concern of some sort that has to do with the blood pressure, right? And that's the reason why you always got to be careful with the Odu Osa and about, involving yourself in anything that's inflammatory. More particularly, right, by now, those folks that understand that they're lactose intolerant, those folks that know they have high blood pressure and they have this sign of OSALOFOGBEYÓ, you got to start looking at your diet and you got to start taking care of yourself because you are pulling a lot of energy. OSALOFOGBEYÓ is a very spiritual sign, right? And because you are pulling a lot of energy, you wear out your body. OSALOFOGBEYÓ. OSALOFOGBEYÓ is a sign that, we find that OSALOFOGBEYÓ is one of those signs that aligns very well with Chango and the power of Chango, right? And when we look at, who is Chango, we look at who is Eshu, right? And we notice that, Eshu or even Elegua, right? When we talk about the terrestrial form of the Orishas, we begin to kind of see the color red. So the reason why those who align with Osa Ogbe, we tell them, hey, don't wear red, right? Or don't wear red excessively, right? When we talk about your clothing, right? And and try to avoid where you can using it in any other fashion as well to avoid the difficulties, right? In spiritual harmony because the red becomes an item that we use later on to save those in the Sadafobim, right? Makes sense, right? So we don't want to use something constantly, wear something constantly, and it almost becomes like an antibiotic, right? If you take too many antibiotics, your body begins to adapt. And we need to kind of make sure that we keep that case of emergency medicine ready to go. And red, and the color red, believe it or not, play a huge, significant part in osatophobia. You got to avoid, certain risky behavior. Outside of phobia, we understand that we got to humble ourselves, but we also got to be smart and tactical and strategic at the same time. This is a reason why in Osada phobia, we always say, hey, be careful with things that have to do with fire, right? As it can cause, right, significant loss, right, of fortune, of life, of your home, right? Osada phobia and those who align with this sign, it's very important for us to always remember that, don't leave candles on overnight. Be careful with the kitchen. All those things matter. Fire, closely related with Chango. We already talked about you are igniting a lot of energy that can cause problems later down the road. So those are very important areas for you to remember. The other big thing is, be careful of marital infidelity because in Osada Phobia, it's important to maintain emotional and spiritual stability. But we go back to the temptation and the desires. Osada Phobia typically has challenges or is presented with those challenges primarily by issue, which places them in that awkward position of either getting involved with somebody who might be married or already committed or already has somebody, right? Or they find themselves on the other side and they have to be careful not to fall into a trap that allows them to commit that infidelity within their own relationship. But infidelity is very, it's a two-pronged approach. It's not just those that you're intimate with, but the infidelity could be your spiritual house. Your infidelity could be your family, right? The hypocrisy that you may tell friends and family, but you're really not saying the truth, right? All those things are infidelities if you truly begin to piece it together, right? Osaraphobia is always going to be a sign that truly locks down the concepts of we have to follow those sacred taboos, those ewos, right? And we have to offer the sacrifices. We cannot necessarily be one that kind of is is subpar in our abilities to ensure that we are honoring, right, those warriors, Orumila, the initiations that we went through, those consecrated orishas that we have received. It does that is very key in OSALOFOGBEYÓ. You got to do it. You got to do it in order to ensure that the blessings is there. If not, you're going to nullify your blessings. You are going to create your own osolbo. OSALOFOGBEYÓ, they have that particular thing hard, right? So you got to be careful. But let's relate those things that I said, what I mean? Because the things I gave you are just guidelines, right? They reflect those timeless necessities for ethical living, right? For balancing health practices, right? Fidelity within relationships of all sorts, right? We got to emphasize the harmony of both the personal and the spiritual realms. Let me see what I got here. All right. Ikechuku or IK. Iburu. Any insight with OSALOFOGBEYÓ no Dodua. Tons of insight with OSALOFOGBEYÓ no Dodua. Hey, don't let me forget before I kill the live, right? Let me talk about that because that is very, very interesting that you mentioned that, right? So OSALOFOGBEYÓ. Let's look at OSALOFOGBEYÓ from another aspect, right? Because it's just not about, all the struggles and all the temptations, etc. Nah, let's look at some other things. OSALOFOGBEYÓ, excuse me. OSALOFOGBEYÓ has to embrace Asowano, San Lázaro. Okay, here's why. Asowano's energy, for physical and spiritual healing aligns with OSALOFOGBEYÓ to a T. OSALOFOGBEYÓ is a sign of spirituality. It's a sign that bridges the gap between the spiritual world and the human world. OSALOFOGBEYÓ, right, begins to tap into the aspects of spirituality in many different ways. OSALOFOGBEYÓ is such a beautiful sign that OSALOFOGBEYÓ, once they master their sign, can light a candle, right? Can light a candle, and at that very moment can resolve problems. But then when we look at San Lázaro, Asowano, right, we talk about Asowano as the person who is a raft of Olofi, a person who has shown the righteousness and the spiritual, ethical, and moral behaviors that's required to truly elevate yourself. Asowano and OSALOFOGBEYÓ are very key in this faith when you talk about that Odun and how it pairs up. You almost have to use a spider web, right, as a reference, right? During spiritual works to connect with protective energies and remove blockages, we got to begin to see that OSALOFOGBEYÓ is very key because OSALOFOGBEYÓ can begin to touch many different aspects, right? Think about the spider web right in the middle and think about the strings that come off and then they loop together again in another circle and they loop again. OSALOFOGBEYÓ is so key and so spiritual that they can begin to touch many different aspects and layers, right, of those parallels. Right? And OSALOFOGBEYÓ is easily able to contradict or block or solbos that may come their way. Right? That's why it's important to always do it both. OSALOFOGBEYÓ has a very specific requirement, of Ifa, just follow your Ita. Follow the guidance of the elders and you find yourself in a good place. OSALOFOGBEYÓ, at times we begin to kind of see that, there's an old saying in OSALOFOGBEYÓ that it's there is a part, right, or there's a separation between godparents and OSALOFOGBEYÓ, right? And everybody says, oh, they already write it in stone. And you see a lot of people do the warnings. You got to be good to your godparents. You got to make sure you don't separate from them. This Odung speaks heavily on the separation of your godparents. But the reason why they separated is not because of a downfall or anything like that. It's because life gets the best of OSALOFOGBEYÓ. And because life gets the best of them, right, their keen instincts or their animalistic instincts where they defer to, right, begins to pull them away. And once they get pulled away, they begin to push other things out and they begin to only focus in one direction instead of focusing on multiple directions because they are like a spider web. They have to understand the parallels. They have to keep everything in harmony, in duality, like we spoke about earlier. People with the sign of OSALOFOGBEYÓ is a sign that, we got to pay close attention, right? Because OSALOFOGBEYÓ is a magnet to spirituality. And when I say magnet is, the eguns will talk to them. The eguns will relay things to them. Their ability to be so spiritual with the ability of just lighting a candle and performing rituals on their own, things can happen, but they got to clean themselves. Because OSALOFOGBEYÓ, you put out what you have in. And if you're not clean, if you're not following the own lessons of OSALOFOGBEYÓ, you give out the negativity instead of giving out the positivity. Instead of you manifesting your truth, right, and your prosperity and your stability and your health, you put out other things. You got to constantly clean yourself. Constantly clean yourself with the herbs of OSALOFOGBEYÓ. Constantly clean yourself, with bread or anything that might be organic, right? Those things are very important. That's the reason why when you clean yourself with certain herbs, certain airways, right? Like a panta muerta, a panta muerto. You got ecoba amalga. That's another, good herb. Dominador is another herb. There's a lot of good herbs, right, when it comes to OSALOFOGBEYÓ, but nonetheless, consult the elders so the elders can begin to make those baths the way you need to make them. But just food for thought. Hey, something about OSALOFOGBEYÓ that I always warn people is because OSALOFOGBEYÓ is that magnet, right? When you have family, you have friends, you have a responsibility to clean yourself. You got a responsibility to ensure that you stay cleansed. Why? Because those around you can get dirty by you. This is a reason why that we have to pay close attention to the children, right, in the sign, and those who have children, right, because their physical and their spiritual well-being is important. And if you mismanage or you neglect yourself from cleaning and the circle starts to get dirty, it's your duties, right, to clean, to ensure that fortune and blessings or whatnot is happening, right, because you're OSALOFOGBEYÓ. So then, brings me to my next topic, right? I mentioned earlier Eshu, right, with Osa Ogbe, right? And when we look at Eshu, Elegba, he accompanies Osa Ogbe like in the Pataki. You begin to kind of see through everything I said, those doors that Eshu opens. But he's also, as we look at Eshu as a guardian of pathways, Eshu facilitates the execution, right, of sacrifices and ensures the communication between the humans and the Orishas. And Osa Ogbe particularly, any neglect of addressing issue may result in a misunderstanding. So just hear me out. Issue and you and issue, those with OSALOFOGBEYÓ and issue, man, you guys need to be tighter than thieves. Two peas in a pot, however way you want to look at it. Why? Because he's the mediator. Issue becomes the mediator of choices, right? And the Odun emphasizes navigating those temptations, avoiding those hypocrisies, right? As a gatekeeper, right? Eshu can make things a lot easier for you, right? Because at the end, if you are tight with Eshu and you find yourself in that ethical and that moral standings, you begin to alleviate a lot of those spiritual obstacles. You harmonize relationships. You mitigate the osolbo. And that's something that you just have to do. So what does this mean? What does this mean in 2024 going to 2025, right? Eshu, the relevance extends for Eshu, right, to all our challenges today, right? Because it symbolizes the necessity, right, to ensure that we are really doing some good informed decision making, right? That we are ethically responsible, right? So then that way we can navigate life's challenges appropriately. And then when you start talking about How do I apply Osa Ogbe, OSALOFOGBEYÓ, right? Osaeshu into my life today? Let's think about it, right? In leadership, as we talked about it earlier, right? To be a good leader, we're reminded to avoid arrogance and hypocrisy, right? Because you undermine trust and you erode the community harmony. Transparency and service to others are going to be critical. I never lose that. OSALOFOGBEYÓ in your relationships, you know, fidelity, respect, open communication, right, are vital, right? Relationships, all relationships, again, not just your intimate relationships. The warnings against, betrayal and abuse highlight the need of mutual understanding and responsibilities in this sign. This is the reason why when you start to read doctrine or your babalao, your awoni orumila comes to you and says, oh, you're saobe, be careful, betrayal and abuse. And it's because you have to have mutual understanding and responsibilities, right? The fidelity, the respect, the open communication are going to be key to every one of your relationships. And what about health and wellness? As we look at it today, stay away from the toxic foods. Be careful, have that good spiritual hygiene, right? It emphasizes the ability of prevention, right, over cure. Right? Don't wait for something massive to happen for you to automatically say, oh my God, I need to go do an ebo, I need to go see Orumi. No, prevention is the key, Osaobe. Prevention is the key. And then I kind of leave you with this last note, right? This Odun, this is a lesson of balance and respect for natural laws. This resonates with today call for sustainability. Eco-consciousness living is what I like to call it, right? We got to be careful because Osaobe, because you are the bridge between the spirit world and this world, it's important for you to take care of this world. You're the bridge. Nobody wants to cross a bridge with a swamp underneath it and it's all dirty and nasty and this. No, you got to be I'm not saying you have to be a tree hugger, but I'm saying you got to take care of the environment, the little things in life. You got a recycle bin, use a recycle bin, right? Don't litter. All those little things matter, right? So, nonetheless, OSALOFOGBEYÓ, timeless wisdom, right? Blending spiritual insight with practical application is important. Ethical living, Eshu's very critical role to ensure the alignment between human actions and the divine will, and Osaobe is right in the middle of that. In today's world, teaching and encouraging, right? The integrity, the resiliency, the harmony in all the facets of our lives, you know what I mean? It's bridging those ancient traditions with those modern realities. Think about it, right? Osaobe is also very interesting when you start to kind of look at it from the divinities, right? And I want to get to the question that I got down here from IK, right? From the divinities like Oduduwa, because Osaobe is very much a sign that's aligned with Orumila, Eshu, Babaluaye, which we also call Asorano, right? Ogun, Obatala, Ochun, right? But also Oduduwa. And the reason why is because many of the facets of Osaobe are also facets and characteristics of Oduduwa. A lot of people don't necessarily explain Oduduwa, like the way I understand Oduduwa. And the way to understand Oduduwa is to remember the war that Oduduwa had with Obatala, right? Where that war could have ended the world. Oduduwa is not only the light, but also the darkness. Osaobe, not only the land of the spirits, but the land of the living. Oduduwa complements Osaobe because Oduduwa is also the candle. Oduduwa, ask any one of your elders. A lot of times they just light a candle in front of Oduduwa and magic happens. Mark my words. So hopefully that kind of makes sense there, IK, on why Odudua is so important, when it comes to, just looking at the concepts, right? So with that said, 45 minutes on the clock from what I see, or 46 minutes. Hey, questions, comments, concerns, throw it in the chat. I want to hear it. Let's see what you got. If one with this sign fails the test of Eshu gives you, and you and over, will there always be an able to help get one realigned? Or is there a real danger of losing one's head? Steve, great question. Now, I would tell you that we got to reflect back to the Pataki, right? The Pataki gives us some moral lesson, some ethical lesson. And in your question, right, no, you fall into the hardships if you're not falling into the role that you need to play, right? The hardship will show itself, but more importantly, it will only not just show itself, but it'll give you the out. This is a reason why it's very important to ensure that we go to those consultations, and we stay aligned with our spirituality, right? Because you're always gonna get those bosses to get you out. Orumila the orishas and eguns are not heartless. No, it's whether you're aligned with them or you're not aligned with them. That's what it really comes down to. So OSALOFOGBEYÓ just teaches us, hey, to stay aligned with them. And those who align themselves with OSALOFOGBEYÓ and have that sign as a toyale somewhere, right? It's going to be very important for us to ensure that we never fall, stagnant on the bosses that we have to do in order for us to push forward. So hopefully that answers that particular question for you, Steve. I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much. No, Buru boy, che. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. Ayaisha. All right. Hey, if there's no further questions, Buru boy, che. Again, like, subscribe, share. Please look at the descriptions if you need any additional information. And then boom. Hey, I appreciate each and every one of you. And hopefully you guys all have a blessed day. And with that said, Iburu, Iboya, Ibuche, Cyberland. Everybody, at least I hope so. See you next time and next Sunday.